Jay Rosenzweig is the founding partner of Rosenzweig and Company. He's an executive recruitment specialist. He specializes in CEO, C-level searches, and board director searches. Jonathan Sackett, you may recall from yesterday, was chief digital officer at 3 advertising agencies, Martin and DDB, and is now CEO of MashburnSackett with his partner, Jamal Mashburn, former NBA All-Star. And Chan Su, who I'm delighted to have. Chan is Chief Digital Officer and Senior Partner at Profit. You all may remember Chan Su, who founded Agencycom back in the early days. What year was that you founded Agency?
94.
1994, really early days of the internet. So please welcome our guests. And just so you know, we may be joined by Mike Geiger. I know he's flying in from the West Coast. If you do see him, let me know. We'll bring him right up to the stage. But I think what I'd like to do is start with Chan's somewhat provocative Wired article. Chan wrote a piece in Wired for called "Is This the Year of the Chief Digital Officer?" And I see it's there. We go. Is 2014 the year of the CDO? And quite frankly, I thought 2013 was the year of the CDO with a couple hundred CDO hires. But I agree with him. You know, we're going to double again, so we should have another 500 chief digital officers hired this year. The key piece of this that I want to take out was the very last sentence. Chan wrote, it's highlighted up here, in the end, the ultimate success of the chief digital officer trend may mean the death of the chief digital officer title. I believe that's possibly true. I think what we're seeing is the CDOs are next in line to run the show. If they're successful in turning an incumbent company around and bringing them into the digital age, they may be next in line. And what I had sort of forecasted last year is already coming true. So some of the chief digital officers we've seen who have taken on this CEO title, we've got seem to have some problems with the clicker. If you guys could just forward that. Yeah, so CDOs who became CEO, not in the last few years, most of these were this year. Some of you who read my blog might know that J.B. Perrett is Chief Digital Officer of Discovery Communications. Just this year, he was named CEO of Discovery Networks International. Alex Bombeck, CEO of Havas. We've got Michael Bloom. Michael had an interesting career, you know, deep into startups. We'll look at some of their backgrounds in detail and maybe get some color commentary from the panelists. But Michael was CDO at Wenner Media under Jan Wenner, and then became CEO of the Guardian News and Media North America. So there's a number of others here. Mike Geiger, of course, who hopefully will join us. But I want to touch on a couple in the media. And you'll notice this is kind of focused on media and advertising. And for those of you who were here last year or who read the talent map or who heard my presentation yesterday, you may recall that advertising and media, you know, these were where the first hires were. So I think they're the kind of leading edge, and, you know, I hate to use the word mature, but for, you know, considering it's only 5 or 6 years old, but because they were the first in this field, it's only natural that we're sort of looking at these as a forerunner to the other sectors like retail and CPG. So, of course, we know Jason Hirschhorn was the first chief digital officer hired, 2005 at MTV, but then we saw the chief digital officer title explode in the advertising sector, which is why I have Jonathan and Chan here, because what I believe happened was we saw these advertising agencies, the big incumbents, that just didn't get it. And so you had a lot of companies, people hanging up their own shingles, starting their own firms, and people like Chan, who started up Agency.com and Razorfish and others. And then I think what happened was the incumbents sort of got a clue and started going on an acquiring spree, bought all these smaller ad agencies back into the fold. They didn't have a title to give these presidents of these smaller firms, and they gave them the chief digital officer title. But I'd like to kind of start there and see how the panelists might feel about that, especially Chan, who founded Agency.com in 1994, and you know, maybe you give the reasons as to why you started that, what you saw as a need in the marketplace as to why you started an agency.
Well, way back, 20 years ago, I think the internet, believe it or not, was not a sure thing, but it was an exciting thing, and so there were quite a few of us who thought that it was a risk worth taking, at least for a little while. It allowed us to express ourselves, I think, in a much different way than we could using conventional media. And that was the excitement that drew us in. 20 years on, it's proven out to be quite a huge trend, I think. And so I think all the way to the CDO title today, I see a couple of kinds of CDOs. One is what I would call the decorative CDO, and that is sometimes large companies need to have one, so they can say they have one. They can tell the board or customers or whatever that they can have one. I mean, that to me is a sort of a glorified digital marketing manager type of role. Then there are others who take it much more seriously. Some of our clients have CDOs who come from business strategy backgrounds, IT backgrounds, and marketing backgrounds. And those are, I think, the people who are on a fairly fast track to become major executives in the company. And then there are the boardrooms. Boards have people that are digital, sort of in background. I'm not quite sure whether that's been sorted out yet. There are quite a few sort of board members who are on boards with digital backgrounds. Not quite sure what their job is, and not quite sure where their responsibilities begin and end.
We had a great, I'm not sure if this is on, but yesterday also, in addition to the 7 CDOs who became CEO, last year 4 CDOs became board members. So you have Jonathan Miller became this board member of the BBC Global, right? And Rob Norman also on BBC Global. He's CDO of Group W, is it? Group M?
Yeah.
I keep getting them confused. M or W, right?
It's a reverse
It's
dyslexia.
upside down.
Exactly. So I think, my point yesterday, there's a Harvard Business Review article that says that only 2% of the Fortune 500 have digitally savvy boards. And globally, the same thing is true. There was an article from The Telegraph that said that only a few percent of the FTSE, both the FTSE 100 and FTSE 250, have digitally savvy board members. And my argument yesterday was, here they are. These chief digital officers are clearly people like David Payne, Vivian Schiller. These people are all board ready. And I'm expecting not only more CDOs to become CEOs, but certainly more CDOs to become board members. How do you feel about that, Jay, being a search consultant?
Well, one of the questions I've been getting of late is related to the fact that so many of the CDOs are coming out of your industry, and why is that? And some ask, is it because of any stereotypical negative thoughts on the digital function generally? And I always say it's very dangerous to make blanket statements about any group or discipline. You look at accountants, for example, they're stereotypically looked at as boring, but Bob Newhart, for example, is one of the greatest comedians of our time. CDOs are at the nexus, really, of marketing and technology, a very unique place within an organization. And they bring a ton to the table, but there's a little bit of a skepticism if I were pressed to talk about stereotypes. If you look at traditional industries like financial services, for example, they may look at digital executives as being somewhat dismissive of what's come before, and related to that, maybe more focused on how to leverage and monetize big data rather than governance issues. So my advice to a CDO who's looking to get ahead at the board level or to the CEO track is to talk outside of your silos, get to know the CFO, get to know the CLO, get to know the organization in a broader way, respect the previous heritage of the company while you're working to ignite change.
Touch on your point, Jay. I mean, I wonder how Jonathan and Chan feel about your question on why are so many coming out of the advertising sector. First of all, there are so many CDOs in the ad sector. 40% of chief digital officers are in the ad sector, clearly way ahead of media and publishing at 15% and 15%. And my assumption is, again, I'm going by assumption that there are so many because of the fact that the big ad agencies just didn't get it. And I also think what you brought up, Jay, was that there are so many great CDOs in the ad sector because by nature, your industry requires you to be conversant in a lot of different client languages. You've got to understand, you've got to move from your Coke account to a CPG account, maybe to a retail account, and it allows you to give great insight into other sectors by the nature of being in the ad world.
Yes.
Yes. One-word answers. Jane trained.
There you go. We're done.
Well, see you all tomorrow.
Yeah, you know, no, try the veal. It's funny because you're right. I think when you work inside of an agency, first of all, I can take pot shots at agencies all day. I've worked at most of them, but I think, but instead of beating people up, I'd rather help them up. I think you got to remember, 1 minute the problem is this: is that the challenge is this. Is a better way to say it. What happens is the agencies are more worried about a staffing model initially, right? So what does that mean? That means that from 9 to 10, you got to be in a meeting for Coca-Cola. From 10 to 11, you've got to do Geico. And then you might get lunch. And then it's the next CPG, it's the next service, it's the next, and you've got to be a jack of all trades. Now, that makes it very difficult to hire a good CDO. Because what should they do? Should they be a salesman? Should they know the technology? Should they know CPG? Should they know verticals? Should they know categories? That's how it works. So, I mean, the model is broken. So what happens is the agencies have to get, the goal of an agency is to stay ahead of the client, right?
Right.
So if you're going to stay ahead of the client, you've got to get somebody who is a master of all trades, which is very difficult to do. And I'm certainly not saying that I'm a master of all trades by any means, but I've become a master of some trades by default, not by design. Okay, I wasn't educated to become a chief digital officer. There was never, that career trajectory was never offered. Mm. And I don't know what's going on in the schools now, but I mean, judging by the amount of questions that I get, the people are still struggling. The titles that people are looking for and the roles that they're looking for don't yet exist. Right? So how do you reinvent yourself and how do you reinvent a category? The goal of a chief digital officer, period, needs to be a constant education. Because again, it's figuring out, you don't know what you don't know, so how do you figure that out and try to get ahead of it? Sure. Because if you can't get ahead of it, the clients can't get ahead of it and you're not helping anyone.
Well, your first role, your career path before the first time you became a chief digital officer, how did you get to that title, and what was lacking in the company you joined that required that? I mean, and
I
also
cheated. I did. No, but what happened was, some of you tweeted. Thank you for all the kind tweets yesterday. By the way, that was I had a lot of fun after I got out of here. I had fun up here too, by the way, except for David Shing. But we can talk about him later.
We had to bleep him.
We got to censor the Shing. So
whenever anybody curses from now on, we're not going to say the curse word. We're going to say Shingy.
He's synonymous with swearing. Yeah, I think when I was my first CDO title was at Arnold corporate in Boston.
What year?
Oh gosh, what year was that? That was 2004. The truth of the matter was they weren't winning enough new business at the time, and frankly, the creative teams there didn't know the first thing about digital. So when I stepped in there and I was taking a look at what they were doing, I was like, okay, this isn't going to get picked up in search because it's all graphic. Right. Is that going to bother the client? And then everybody shingies their pants, right? Because oh crap, not. See, I'm using it. But then they're like, okay, so now what do we do? So you're forcing them to reinvent themselves, and that was a tough role. I got to tell you, I think the first week I was there, everybody raises their hands like, "Yay, we've got a CDO," and the next week I'm not invited to meetings because they don't want to hear the truth. Right. Hopefully we've come further than that.
But back to Chan's point, right? In some cases, there are advocacy roles. When an agency is seen a little bit behind the times, I think we've moved now from, in the advertising sector, we've moved from the sort of advocacy roles both internally and externally to win the client. So in other words, give a sort of graphic representation of this. You wheel the CDO out of the closet. You put him in front of the client in 2004 to let them know we get digital. You wheel the guy back into the closet after you win the thing, right? But now we're at the point, I think, in most ad agencies where it's really operational. You're not the advocate anymore. People get that we have to do things, and it's no more high-paid navel gazer, CDO titles. It's really people who are executing. But the interesting thing is, at the newer adopters in the newer sectors like retail and CPG, we're seeing some of those advocacy roles replay itself. We're seeing the ad agency model replay itself in others until we get to the point where that company has gone beyond an advocacy role, and now they have to get the roll up your sleeves.
I love that point. You got to remember, when the Martin agency hired me, they weren't yet on a tear, and we had about 400 employees. When I left there, we had about 800. And we got Agency of the Year and all that other stuff. But what happened was, when they brought me in, they wanted to first see if I'd be comfortable giving them a speech. So their board sat there while I started a speech, and they wanted to see if I was comfortable in front of people. And the funny thing is, I stopped my speech halfway through, and I said, look, you guys, what are you trying to do? Let's forget this behind me. I'm comfortable up here. It's okay. Let's talk about this. And you know what? Not everybody looked at each other because they didn't know what they wanted to do and they didn't know what they needed. But until we started winning new business and the clients were asking for me, then they saw the light. Yeah. But up until that point, it was almost a pull strategy versus a push. Once they saw, oh, we should be asking that guy or that guy's team, which we started to build around me, they didn't know what to ask for.
I think the key point here is flexibility, is what you're talking about, flexibility of mind. Really, I'm in the business of assessing leaders and placing leaders for companies, and it's no longer about being able to formulate and communicate broad strategy and objectives, which is important. It's also, to get to the top, you really need to have, in this business environment, the flexibility of mind to alter course really quickly as market conditions warrant. So it's about being a communicator in the fullest sense of the word, both being a good speaker but also a very good listener. And to your point about building great teams around you, it's about being able to attract and to motivate and to leverage good teams and high-performance teams. It's not only about selecting, which is important, it's about really leveraging these teams, which is critical.
If you're going to ask me to code, you're going to be sorely disappointed in the results. So, I mean,
so you got to have the big picture.
No, but I think we have to get out of the little ad ghetto and start thinking a little bit bigger, because those of us who come from media backgrounds were confronted with digital media much earlier than many others.
Right, exactly.
And so we necessarily had to adopt earlier, and some of us found excitement in it. And so some of the early adopters, you, me, we leveraged that differential in information. It's not that we had much better executive ideas, we just that we knew a little bit more than the other guy. And I think we were able to leverage that into an entrepreneurial position. Fact is that, Jonathan, for example, you were CDO, but now you're head of your own firm because that was in you. I think you were an entrepreneurial person. Many of us are self-starters. Now comes the phase where that CDO idea needs to go out into the wider industry. Right. The Boeings of the world, the GEs of the world.
That's right. Oil and utilities and everything.
Yeah, the UBSs of the world. And so this is the phase where at this point at Profit, we deal with a lot of clients who are confronting this aspect of their business, because it's been 20 years since the advent of the web. It's now time. The internet trend has reached these companies and shaken them by their root. So we have to deal with this. And so, to me, the CDO title is a temporary fix during a transitional period when people will be maybe not jack of all trades, but maybe they'll be T-shaped people. They'll come from a certain background, but they'll be able to relate to many others. And so, for example, when I came into Profit, we hired very few digital specialists. We wanted to create the marketer of the future. And the marketer of the future, or the consultant, a business executive of the future, is not one part this, one part that. That person may come from digital background, but even if they don't, they better know digital. Yeah. So you can no longer silo these things. And Chief X officer naturally silos this incredibly important trend.
It's no coincidence I have you and Jonathan on this panel, because the title of the panel is From CDO to CEO, and in the ad sector you're the most mature. So interestingly enough, you got Jonathan, who was CDO, who's now CEO, jumped out, started his own firm, And Chen, you went from CEO, Agency.com, now you're CDO, you know?
That's
and
right.
I don't see that as a drop in title. And I gave an example yesterday of Vivian Schiller. Vivian Schiller was CEO of NPR, National Public Radio. She went almost, you could argue, a downgrade in title to be CDO of NBC News. That's not, you know, to me, that's an interesting shift for her, but not unusual in that now you're a CDO at Profit, right? And so it's an interesting title in that it's almost like a stepping stone to the CEO title, but not necessarily, you know, people are taking what you would think is a step down from CEO to CEO to CDO. But in actuality, I think she increased her influence by making, and yours as well.
I think it depends. There are many people, like myself. I started in media and digital, and I'm still in love with it. So the fact that I don't have to worry about, you know, real estate leases, you know, hiring the next group of assistants,
Maybe we can talk after
payroll systems. I've been there. I've done that, and that is great for me in my at my age.
Yeah,
at
you
this
can do all the
phase,
fun
right? But I'm still in love with that part of the world that is digital, all things digital.
Sure.
Right. So I get to focus on that. It's a lifestyle choice as much as a career choice for many of us.
There's an article in Forbes. I was quoted in Dan Woods wrote a great article in Forbes just last week, and said the title of it was "Don't let the chief digital officer steal the best parts of your job." And he's really has a CIO focus, and clearly the CDO is doing the fun stuff, and this is what you.
I wish they hadn't said that because now the secret is out.
Yes.
But to your point about breaking into more traditional industries, I think the digital executives have to broaden in terms of the exposure that they get and the education they get, and maybe even on the governance side, like I referred to earlier. A leader of a business has as its primary focus the protection of brand and reputation, and you know, issues of privacy can be real brand eaters. Look at Target. Not only did they take a reputational hit because of a breach of security, they also took a hit as far as stock price goes and profitability and sales. So a CDO or a CEO, particularly in the more traditional industries, needs to look at every action from the point of view of, if I do such and such, how will this affect our brand and reputation? Will it enhance it, or will it endanger it?
I do think, though, that there is a risk in this title, because really, most cases in a non-media, non-advertising company, a chief digital officer is chief digital first, and officer not so much.
Right.
You know, an officer of a company has fiduciary duties and authority that commensurate with those duties.
Right.
In many cases, that's not the case. It's sort of like, you know, oh, if we don't give Jonathan this title, he's going to leave and start his own company. So let's give him this Chief XYZ muckety-muck title so he'll stick around, but he'll still do all the same things as before. That's the hope, right?
Agreed. But if that CDO wants to go to that next level, to that CEO level, those are some of the things they may want to round out.
Well, in fact, I think that people should not take that title, should not take that job.
Understood.
If it's just a bullcrap
Well,
title.
see, that's the thing. That's a great point, because it's hard to sniff that out, though.
Right. Oh, of course.
So what happens is, what I've learned now, if I were to interview for a CDO position, I would know better what to ask. Back in the day, you know, shit, I didn't know what to ask. I mean, hey, we need somebody who knows digital. Sackett, get up there. But I think what happens is, now I think people have to define the role that they want to play, and be careful of the title that comes with it.
Yeah.
That's the way I would look at it, because I got to tell you, you know, I was reading a bunch of articles about Jamal and myself, and I never interviewed for these things. We did for the Wall Street Journal. Anybody else that published us didn't talk to me. So they were writing their own things, and I got to tell you, digital was in the forefront of everything. We're an all-inclusive agency, and we're an entertainment venue too, and we've got a TV show coming out. We do commercials, but I got to tell you, that chief digital officer thing is around my neck like a noose, and people still want to. Well, they're a digital agency. Well, okay, I guess you can call us that, but that's one aspect of what we do. I think a lot of this, what it comes down to, you're right. Careful of the title. And make sure you define the role, because that CMO is glaring at you with guns.
And
in
the
his
CIO.
eyes.
And the
You know,
CIO.
so
And
you
the
got the
CIO,
tech guys and the
absolutely.
marketing
Right.
people saying,
So that now
"We're
suddenly
already
there's
doing
a
this."
threat because you're in the room. You know,
Right.
when we're all here to do the right thing, and we're all here to inspire, not disrupt. That's the way I look at things. And as long as you go in that room and you say, look, these are the things that I'm best at, these are the things that I can do, there's such a broad array of things. I remember back at the Martin Agency, there was this one individual I worked with, became really good friends with him. But every sentence, when I'd have a question, well, wait, who's going to do this? Who's going to do this? It was, well, isn't that the role of the chief digital officer? Isn't that his job? Isn't that his job? Yeah, well, I can't buy the media. I'm not a media guy. Right. You don't want me coding. I can design and develop, and I can certainly architect the plan. But again, how much of master of none do you want me to be?
Sure. I agree with that point completely. Clear definition of roles and responsibilities, or you're going to run into a lot of conflicts with the people who are tasked with helping you do a good job, the chief marketing officer. And what we're seeing too is there are a lot of responsibilities that people assume the CDO is taking on. One of them is social. And
that's right.
In the majority of cases, in the people that I've evaluated, they're not doing social. And that's why when you looked at our top 10 list for the top 10 CDOs on cloud and the top 10 CDOs by Twitter follower, granted, not a great way of looking at influence, just Twitter followers. The 10 loudest, yeah.
Well, I thought it was a great way. I was number 3.
And, you know, yeah, you were number 3.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. But, you know, you kind of look at that and say, well, there's one thing to argue that says most people in an agency world are more concerned about building their client's brand on social media than their own personal brand.
That's right. Well,
so it's not part of your job, right?
No.
Hopefully, and your job is to get Coke's follower.
I'm glad you said that, though. That's the other thing. You know, social is the big thing, and it's not a destination. It's one of the pistons inside of an engine that fuels that engine.
If you want omni-channel outreach, social is just one piece of omni-channel.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have anybody in the room here been told to can you make us a viral video? I mean, every time I hear it, I die a little. But between make a viral video and well, we got to get social. We got to get social. Well, okay, but
get me more likes on my Facebook page.
Yeah,
well, is that going to achieve your real goal?
I know a company that can do that, by the way. Very cheap.
But forget all that crap. At the end of the day, what is the objective and what are you trying to do, and then how does social fit into that? And by the way, it's the same thing with the title. It's the same thing with the role. What are we trying to do as an organization, and how can I best help?
I do think that there was a legitimate need, right, for many companies to get developed in many of these sort of specific functions, social and so on and so forth. The problem is that they're asking someone with the title of Chief Digital Officer to be focusing on every single silo.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we were talking about this earlier at this table. There's not enough people in the middle to upper middle management layer who know their business. So there's this conflation of tasks that chief digital officers who think themselves as an officer of the company, right, and others who think of these folks as, well, that's the geeky guy, right, he or she should know everything about anything to do with digital. So there's that mismatched expectation.
Well, role definition and clarity of role is huge in any organization, and unfortunately, a lot of companies don't have it right.
Nobody has it right now because it's a brand new title, really. Yeah. I mean,
but even the crossover of digital and marketing and tech, it could get very confusing pretty quickly without proper role definition.
Well, you throw strategy in there. I mean, there are quite a few pharma companies that we work with who have taken people who are in business strategy and business planning and put them into the chief digital roles. Right. So now you've got pressure from 3 corners: strategy, marketing,
and tech.
Right. CIOs are not happy. CMOs are not happy, and the CDO is the brunt of all of that animosity.
And Jay, you've made good arguments. I've seen you write before about in the past, a CEO used to come from the marketing world or from the sales world or from PR, wherever they came from. Now they seem to be coming from that digital world, right? So I guess digital, how do you, I guess my question is, what's some of the single or most important skills chief digital officers will need in order to make that succession up to CEO? What skills are they missing? And we'll maybe look through some profiles right now.
Absolutely.
And get some color commentary on but your thoughts on that.
Looking at the profiles, what I see, as I mentioned earlier, is individuals who have innovated, who have shown flexibility of mind, were able to be ahead of the curve in terms of where the market's going and really get a pulse of the business world so that they can, first of all, adapt to their client needs, both internally and externally. This communication piece is always key, so fostering open two-way communication with the people that you're working with, both up and down and sideways, really is a key enabler in this day and age, and it's a really, really important skill set.
So here were the key stats. Remember, last year we did the talent map, right? And I said that, and now again this year you look at 7 CDOs became CEO. So I said to myself, well, that's interesting, but what were their backgrounds that enabled them to make that jump? What were the skills that these people had? And so what can we train, what are we doing to help our CDOs in the room make that jump as well? So what I did was I went back to hundreds of online profiles and resumes. And the 2 most interesting stats to me that were mind-boggling was in the advertising sector. 2/3 of the CDOs in the advertising sector were previously CEO, general manager, or president.
Right.
Now, granted, in the ad sector, you're talking about like president of DDB Chicago, not DDB Global, right?
Yeah, right.
And there's a lot of that going on.
Yep.
But look at, like, here's a good example from the sector, right? You look at a guy like Alex Bombeck. Remember that stat, 63% of these CDOs were previously president, GM, or president. And here's a great example, right? He was previously MD, he was previously president, he was previously president of North America for Havas Worldwide. And I think he's actually CEO now, not CDO.
Well, that's a great example, and it speaks to what I talked about earlier. When you're a president, you've got all these cross-functional skills and experience. So you've gotten a broader perspective on the chief financial officer function, on the chief legal officer, on the broader issues related to government. Well, if you're successful enough to get that next level.
I've had some presidents who they might have to need help tie their shoes.
Well, maybe they're good politically as well.
Well, yeah, never underestimate the power of politics.
Yeah, 100%. But it's really getting to know a business in a much broader sense so that you can ultimately lead a business.
Let's look at DDB since you were there, right? You get Paul Gunning. So Paul Gunning was CDO of DDB Chicago. I'm hearing that he did such a great job with some accounts like McDonald's. And by the way, now McDonald's hired a chief digital officer, right? Mm-hmm. So look at Paul's background. Again, another example of someone who was previously president and CEO. He was VP and GM at Tribal. He was CEO Tribal Worldwide, president of, and then he became chief digital officer. Do you know of him and his background?
I know Paul really well.
Me too. Give us some background.
Paul Gunning is a jerk. I just wanted to make sure that Paul's a good friend of mine, and when I was the MD of the DDB office in Chicago, and I was also chief digital officer. So I don't know why those 2 titles. I don't know, but Paul was head of Tribal at the time, and there couldn't have been a better fit than him for that role, because you got to remember that they had brought in a guy previous to him from Gotham, and digital was not a priority. It wasn't a priority within the agency, and frankly, I think when they hired me, they said, "Oh, look, we got the guy from the Martin agency," right. And then then now go back in your closet, kind of. But with Paul, you're talking about a guy who gets business. Okay, he gets business first and foremost. Now, with a guy with that title, you get removed from the technology, right? How much do you really know about social? How much do you really know to implement, measure, track, and traject social? Maybe not that much, but I'll tell you something else. Paul is a very smart guy, he's a decent guy, and he also knows how to hire. Mm-hmm. So now what you're talking about is a transition. DDB Chicago in particular hasn't won a new piece of business in years. And coming off of a track record like we had at the Martin agency, that was tough for me. Right. But now you've got a guy in the position who knows how to sell it, knows how to architect the plan to do the work, not just like these big agencies 9 times out of 10 are sourcing all their work. So you got to wonder, you just see these papers being shuffled around, you don't know who's doing work anymore. It's we source this to Tribal or to somebody else. With him, he's actually rebuilding it from the ground up, and you've got the pillar clients like they've got Capital One, they've got State Farm Insurance, and they've got McDonald's. Wow! I mean, you can't talk about a great way to architect a new plan, and some clients like Capital One, which was a great client to work with, that gets it. Yeah. So I mean, the guy's set up to win, but I think it's because he grew up digitally.
Yeah, I'm hearing the background on this. I don't know if this is true, but there was some scuttlebutt saying that because of the great work that they did, DDB did with McDonald's, that was one of the reasons McDonald's hired a chief digital officer, because a lot of people were arguing, why isn't the CMO doing this at McDonald's? Why do we need a CDO? And they got a terrific CDO. You got a CDO there in Atif, who was general manager at Amazon Kindle for years, right? Does he get digital? Before that, he was the head of product at Yahoo, and before that, AOL Ventures. So this is a guy who's digital native. You know, he grew up with this stuff, and now he's CDO at McDonald's.
Well, you know, that's the thing
job.
too, though. McDonald's is such a massive, massive client. You got to remember, what do they have? Like 60 or 70 agencies inside of there.
Oh,
right?
wow.
But you've also got DDB being lead agency. Working with McDonald's, we mandated that they would hire a chief digital officer, and with me departing, we would make sure that we would fill my shoes too, so that you had 2 CDOs, one on each side of the table,
right?
Okay, to architect those plans. And I think that's the true partnership of working with somebody like McDonald's. The bigger the organization, you know, we never had that camaraderie with Walmart as much as I would have liked. You know, in fact.
Why do you think that is?
You know, the siloing, their digital is run out of San Francisco, and then they're out of Arkansas. So even my contact, the head of all things marketing and digital, couldn't get access to their own data because the guys in San Francisco are like, no, that's ours.
Well, that's how they started that Walmart.com as a separate company.
Yeah, exactly. Separate business unit, separate P&L.
But I mean, you know, by the book, which is they said they wanted to go to Silicon Valley, where all things digital come from, and you know, start Walmart.com because they didn't want to have it with regular Walmart people, and I think that was the challenge.
Yeah, well, you know, that's the thing, is that even to this day they still haven't synergized the offering like that. And you know, how much are you really marketing? How much are you really understanding of the consumers if you're not talking to each other?
Yeah.
I mean, and that was just a rarity. Like I said.
Oh, no, it's not a rarity. I mean, that's the problem with data. 95% of it, you got all this data, but 95% of it is not being analyzed, not being used for insights because of that same problem. The information is being siloed, and instead it should be, the data people should be a service component to the entire organization. They need to help sales and help marketing get the right information to the right person at exactly the right time to get the customer what they need. And instead, it's being siloed in San Francisco. That makes no sense at all.
No, well, we got to remember, so oftentimes it happens. We live our lives in chains and never know we had the key.
You know, you talk
the music.
You talk
that's
about
that's from an Eagles song, I think, by the way. But.
Yeah, you talk about the attract to leadership. You could talk about experience as much as you want, but I found in my experience placing leaders is, to draw a sports analogy in deference to your partner, always draft a great athlete. When you draft
the franchise,
when you draft a great athlete, you could work around finding the right pieces to complement that great athlete. I think it's really encouraging to see the explosion of the CDO role. It'll have to be refined somewhat. You know, maybe it's an interim title.
It's going to evolve like anything.
It's going to evolve like crazy. But I just spoke with the chief technology officer of a big insurance company, and I actually sent him my partner David's talent map, and he's so juiced about the CDO role.
And that's another new field, like banking now. You got a CDO at SunTrust. You got it. And insurance. There is a chief digital officer for 2 years now at Nationwide. There's hiring like crazy in Europe for CDOs in insurance, which again, a regulated industry, relatively slow to get the new stuff, with the exception of Geico. I mean, you've done some incredible stuff with Geico, but AXA in Europe. You've also got Abril, a big insurance company. I think it's out of France. They have a chief digital officer.
So this one guy that I've been speaking with, he's got tremendous leadership skills. He's worked across the company. He's not in marketing, but he cares about the marketing of the company. He wants to be the CEO, and he feels the next great path for him is CDO and then CEO.
Well, let's get a chance. So Chen, so like Vivian, you went from CEO to CDO, right? You didn't see that. You don't have any problem with doing that at all. You don't see that as a downgrade. You're excited, you're jazzed because it's the fun stuff. But also, people are doing this as a career move.
Yes, they are, and I mean, I think it's really great that we have that flexibility.
Sure.
I think CDO can be sort of a conduit to the CEO title. But only if you are become more an officer than a digital.
Right.
Because at some
exactly.
Role definition.
Yeah, that's right.
You gotta, if you're going to be CEO, you can't be the geeky one. You have to be actually the chief executive officer. So I think it's really about developing yourself. You can't just sort of ride that pony until to the end.
But that's why I think a chief digital officer is perfectly placed to become CEO, because you have to work across. You have to work with your C-level compadres across the silos of the organization. You've got to work with marketing. Got to work with IT, got to get buy-in from the CEO.
I think it's a legitimate thing. I mean, I know lots of CEOs also come from financial backgrounds.
Right.
And I think some of them come from CDOs. It'll be interesting to see, because there's an increasing amount of attention paid to the customer experience. Right. And a lot of the experience is being done digitally, whether it's B2B or B2C. Sure. The consumerization of experience is really pointing the way towards the necessity for technology to be wedded very, very firmly to the product and the experience of that company. Yeah. It does kind of seem to point the way to CDO as at least a stopping point for an executive on the move.
Definitely.
At least.
Yeah, I just read a great quote from Peter Drucker, who said that the two functions that really matter within a company are really innovation and marketing. And he could have been talking about the CDO title in its biggest sense decades before the CDO title even existed. Mm-hmm. But, innovation and marketing.
Absolutely. And this consumerization piece, Chan, is, IBM does a CEO survey every year. Yeah. And this year it just came out a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And the topic was, it's the year, maybe it's not the year of the CDO, maybe it's the year of the consumer. That the consumerization of IT, the power of the consumer these days. And let's touch on that with your twilight of the brands. Tell us about this.
Well, so there's a really good book called Absolute Value. In it, the authors argue that in a world where there's a lot more information than there used to be at everybody's disposal, the marketing tactics of the past, which relied on a small set of consideration and differential in information, is no longer effective. And they've done a ton of experiments. Mm-hmm. You know how when, I don't know if a lot of you are from marketing backgrounds, but a lot of people sort of conduct research on brand preference and product pricing and so on and so forth. With the availability of information today at every consumer's hand, a lot of those effects are erased. So in this brave new world, what is the role of marketing? What are the tactics that we can use to do that? I know tons of people who will come right back and say, it's more confusing than ever and so on. But I do think that there is a legitimate sort of question out there that we haven't addressed yet. Okay? In a world where information about a product or a brand is so readily available, mm-hmm. can we still use the old tactics of assertion?
Our brand's dead.
Right. Is the idea of a brand like that we used to think of, are those things dead?
Who wrote the article? Was it in the New Yorker or Vanity Fair?
So James Surowiecki wrote the article in the New Yorker, but the article was about this book.
Yes.
And frankly, I think it was a bit of a sensationalizing of the book,
sure.
but it does get through.
It's a great article. It's a one-page to read if you look it up, The Twilight of the Brands and the book. Yeah. But the argument is, in the past you used to buy a Ford, and you would always sort of reinforce, I buy a Ford. But these days, there's so much information at the consumer's fingertips, from consumer reports to websites to all this information. You don't buy a Ford just because your parents did and because you always had a Ford. You think, well, maybe the Hyundai is not a bad deal, right? And you end up getting a better car for your dollar. And so, what's the role of a brand these days? And do they? What does an advertising agency do in a world where the brands may be dead or dying?
You guys are at the forefront of creating what the new agencies need to do, I think.
Well, yeah, but again, I think that's by default. If I said this yesterday, if it wasn't for all the screw-ups of the big agencies, I wouldn't be sitting here. I mean, I'm winner by default right now. But to your earlier point, I also want to say that it's funny because information inundation means no information, right? True. You get inundated with so much. Now, the other thing is, most people don't know that most of the information that they're looking at out there is crap. It's seeded. Right? Yeah. So what we
true.
Yes, what we see all the time, and again, we're on the inside because I know, Company X, this is where I probably got to be careful, but Company X has a whole staff of people doing nothing but seeding their soils out there. So we got to be very careful about that. What is the filter and the lens that you put on that to get at the right information to make sure that it's accurate?
Right. But I do think that we have to get out, so many of us are inside baseball players, right? Inside baseball people. So we know some of the stuff going on. For most people, the accuracy of the information is good enough for them to make purchase decisions.
A lie can be a truth.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's the scary part, right? You go to Amazon, you look at the reviews, and it's got 4 stars versus another one that has 2 stars. Okay. Done.
Or that restaurant.
Right?
It's
not
Which
like
I've been burned on a couple times.
It's not like you're buying a house, right?
Right.
You're not spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on some of these products.
Right.
So those choices, in that fraction of a second, when you make that decision, do you do it cognitively, based on the numbers that you see right then and there, with a somewhat credible source, right? Or semblance of credibility, or do you do it because yesterday you saw on TV, right, that this product will make you sexier?
Right.
How do you make that decision? That decision science is shifting radically. And if we don't know that as chief digital officers or chief executive officers, we're missing out on a tectonic shift in consumer trends.
Sure. Well, we could touch on this more. Angela from Arnold now at Milk at Agency is going to thank you for being on that panel too. Chan's doing double duty, and I know you're going to talk about that in a couple hours. But we're running low on time. What I wanted to make sure we do though is just 1 or 2 more profiles, if that's okay, because we looked at the ad profiles, the profiles of CDOs who became CEO in the ad sector. But the other amazing statistic to me, and I've been looking at these stats, it's been my life for 3 years. Again, 60% of CDOs in the ad sector have GM or president backgrounds. But the other interesting stat was in the media sector. So in the media sector, after looking at their backgrounds, I found that 33% of CDOs in the media sector were previously CEO, GM, or president too. So let's look at a couple of those, right? So you've got Liz Schimmel at Condé Nast, J.B. Perrette this year, and I think we got one more, Michael Bloom. So let's just take a look at Michael and maybe one other. But look at Michael's background. Talk about a digital native, right? I mean, co-founder, EVP at Stockpoint. That was acquired by News Corp. You've got president and COO at Amaze. That was acquired by AOL. Then he was VP and GM at AOL, of course, as he was acquired in. Then he was senior VP and GM of digital at MTV and Viacom. EVP and GM at Dr. Oz Digital.
Dr. Oz,
yeah, and then CDO at Wenner, right? And of course, I would say to his credit, he was only there for 6 months, but that's when Jan Wenner famously said he wasn't going to adopt the iPad, so try to drag somebody who's doing magazines like Rolling Stone to the pad, to tablets, and your CEO is not willing, so he jumped and then became CEO of the Guardian News and Media. What an incredible background, right? So that's why I say it's not a surprise to me when you look at these people's backgrounds that they're becoming CEOs, because this guy is already not only a CEO but a digital native. Any comments or color commentary on Michael?
No, I know Michael is a great guy. I think it just like the old adage, nothing kills a shit product like great advertising, right? I mean, I think for something like this, the diversity of his roles, I think, is key.
Right.
I mean, not just the diversity of the roles, the diversity of the industries.
Sure.
You could argue that everything is publishing. You could almost argue that, but I got to tell you, something this diverse, I think, for me, the CDO role at Arnold, at Martin, and at DDB were completely different roles every time. But a headhunter coming after me would look at that and go, "Okay, you were a CDO 3 times."
Right.
I really wasn't. Otherwise, you got to look at it this way. In all of our careers, you could argue that we've got 20 years of experience, but you've only got 6 months of practical experience because you're just replicating the same thing over and over. If we're not able to reinvent ourselves, what Michael Bloom has done, I think, is even though the piece of paper in front of us, or the screen in front of us, is telling us something, those roles are very different at each of those places, even if it's the same title.
you
Well, I
make
think
an
what he
excellent
does too, I mean, but just briefly, he dispels the myth that I see on Twitter all the time, right? You see, oh, CDOs, these people are useless. They're high-paid navel gazers. They come in and, all they do is doing advocacy
I've
or
never
they're
heard that before.
internally or externally, right? This guy clearly, and a lot of these other profiles we'll see, it dispels the myth that these people are these sort of fluffy title.
Yeah,
For an organization.
Michael Bloom
This guy
could be a
has
CFO
very
anywhere,
deep,
I'll
right,
tell you.
he could go anywhere.
And that's
he
not
could go
on his
into
resume.
finance, he could go into
Yeah,
online world, he could go into media with the MTV and Viacom background, and now, of course, more media as CEO of The Guardian. So what's next for Michael, right? I mean, that's, and let's look at another, because again, we're running short on time, but I think it's invaluable to see, JB. JB was just named president of Discovery Networks International. Look at this guy's background. I mean, he has financial background from the very beginning. So he was obviously in, as an analyst.
It was an audit.
Yeah, GE Capital, VP of Biz Dev at NBC Universal, CFO, again, finance at Bravo, Senior VP of New Media at NBCU, and then president of digital distribution. So you could argue that he went from president to CDO. Would you say that's a downgrade in title? It was a way station for him back to the top, right? Yeah. And now it's president of international, not just president of domestic. So again, insightful. Any comments on that? Or maybe we'll run to Liz. Yeah. And then we'll get some questions from the audience. But Eric Grilly, too, who I just love, his background was president at Philly.com. So again, I think he gets the online world. Then he moved to EVP and CDO at NBC Sports. And now he's president of Ollie. You may not know of Ollie, but it's a sort of an alliance for sports media, president of Ollie. And finally, Liz. I think we had Liz, sorry. But I think that's probably enough. You all kind of get the message that these are natives. My biggest question coming out of this is, if there are CDOs out there who don't have that GM and president experience before them, is there a future for them as running the show? And what are the skills they need to pull in so that they are next in line to succeed?
So the common theme with all of these leaders is breadth of experience, and it's adaptability, to your point, the ability to adapt to all kinds of different environments, both functionally and sector-wise. 9 times out of 10, when I'm looking to place a CEO for a business, whatever the business might be, adaptability is so important. If candidates are too siloed, either in one function or business, it's much more difficult to predict future success as a leader. It's a really big piece. It used to be that loyalty meant being in the same business for 30 years. Now you have unattractive candidates because of the fact that they've been in businesses for so long. For now, loyalty, I'd say, is 5-year stints in various businesses and showing the ability to adapt to different environments. Those are the most attractive.
I would say, too, the goal of the CDO, an interesting person yesterday was David Chivers of Jostens. He was hired into Jostens and he had a media background, Factiva, Dow Jones, right? He's probably in the audience, but what he did then was he was hired by he was recruited into Jostens, which, makes rings, your high school graduation ring and NFL Super Bowl rings and NHL title rings. But interestingly enough, his CEO left after 3 months. So he was left, it took them a year to get a new CEO in. What I liked about what happened next was he was required to interact with the board. He was required to meet with the people who were hiring the new CEO. It required him to meet with the chief technology officer, the CIO, the chief marketing officer. So that, I think, is what CDOs in the audience who don't have GM experience or president experience really need to do over the next few years, is to make sure that you're working really, really closely with the CIO, the CMO, the CEO, so that you get more of those experiences.
And the
so that
CFO,
you can run
the CLO,
and the
whatever.
CFO, the COO, absolutely.
Attend conferences and programs outside of your functional areas of responsibility.
And have a seat at that board meeting. You need to be at the board meetings, even if you just get 5 minutes or 10 minutes with the board to express to them how important digital is and what you're going to be doing over the next years, so that you've got board level recognition as well. But
absolutely.
Maybe we'll leave it at that and take some questions from the audience. Thank you. Please give a round for my panelists. Fabulous job. If you have any questions, just raise your hand. Sure, we'll start in the back. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Maria from IBM, and thanks for the mention of the C-Suite study. We have another C-Suite study coming out next month, which talks about how the C-Suite makes decisions together across the different functions. But I was curious, from your perspective, how you would regard that decision-making process across the different C-Suite. In other words, how do you integrate, how do you approach decision-making, whether it's evaluating technologies or evaluating vendors or solutions with your other C-suite colleagues? I'm just kind of curious how that decision-making process happens.
Well, much better now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, for us, you know, we're a fairly small company, but we do help our clients make those decisions quite a bit. And we are not in the technology provider business, so we feel like we have a bit more of a say in the C-suite because we don't have a sort of a conflict of interest there. What we're finding is that the decision making is shifting from a sort of a foundational infrastructure technology to a much more versatile, real agile kind of requirement. We're also finding that people are starting with what do our customers want first, as opposed to here's a list of the functionalities that the various departments required for their work. So from the CIO, if you will, the chief internal technology, to maybe the chief sort of public technology. So that decision-making process is shifting somewhat.
Yeah, I just add to that, Jamal, for any of you who've ever seen him on interviews or anything, he really is a team player. And it's the way he is. He was never, I don't think he was ever really the standout star, although I don't really watch basketball, so I couldn't tell you. But he's really into the team player mindset. But the other thing that I'll tell you is, having worked for the number of agencies that I have, I've found that this isn't just a word or a vernacular, but integration doesn't work. To me, integration means you're making Frankenstein. You're bolting things together that don't belong. And I think if you can get people to accept that and call it, how do we unify? How do we all get on the same page? And I know it just sounds like ad agency words, and I really don't mean it that way. I think if people can get that inherent mindset to say, look, if we're all going the same direction in lockstep, it's not about the digital guy's agenda, the marketing person's agenda. This person's going to lose their staff unless we get those people in the staffing, from a strategic standpoint or from the strategy group. We got to knock down those walls, and you have to knock them down in your own head first. So at the Martin Agency, I thought we did a really good job at that at the time anyway, to say, look, let's get unified. The integration, bad; unified, good.
And I may have misnamed that report. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but that was a great report that it's IBM's annual report. Did I get the name of that right? If you could give her the mic again? If you want to let everyone know,
yeah, no problem. We have a number of C-suite reports that we've done. We've done one on the CEO, the CMO. I'm pushing for one on the CDO. But the one that's most, I think, compelling that's coming out next month, again, talks about decisions across the C-suite, how they work together. So that, I think, will be quite interesting.
Super. Thank you.
Or do they?
Or do they, right?
Yeah.
Ideal world, they do.
Chan, I heard you say companies are starting to look at things from the customer standpoint, B2B or B2C. Say a little bit more about that, because it should be all about the customer experience, and the customer's expectations and technology have outstripped what marketers are doing. So how can we help marketers catch up?
Okay, so to me, it's gone sort of beyond, customer experience has gone beyond marketing. It used to be, I think, that a lot of the customer experience was meant to be the visual or the ads in store or the usage experience. I think, and that was left in many ways to the PR people, the marketing people, and so on. Today, what I'm seeing is a shift towards the customer experience being at the very sort of center, at the beginning of product design even. And that means that the infrastructure of a company is shifting. and the perspective is shifting. So, for example, it used to be that we had one kind of a system for work and another kind of system for outside of work. Okay, so I don't know, in my day we used to use Lotus Notes for internal, and then maybe AOL for with friends, right? Today we don't make those distinctions anymore. So just speaking specifically about technology, people are using consumer technology to do business work, business kind of work. And that throws everything out the window. The CIOs have to adapt.
BYOD.
B2B people have to adapt to the fact that their customers don't want to use the SAP systems with the little green letters anymore. They want the thing to be as experiential, as easy, as seamless as Amazon, even if they're ordering millions of dollars worth of stuff, right? So that's shaken things up, and that's sort of what I mean. Customer experience is now, that thinking has penetrated into every facet, down to credit writing, the accounts payable, okay, the payroll accounting. So that kind of approach, I think, is now beginning. Companies are beginning to understand that. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, we got to get this. And sadly, in government, it's even more frustrating. I can't imagine being a CDO. Like, we had that interview with Rachel yesterday. It was mind-boggling how much she accomplished given the restrictions of being in a government agency. Think about things that are immovable, like the procurement process and GSA contracts. That stuff's not going to be, innovated anytime soon, sadly. But the people working at a government agency, when they go home, they go to Amazon, they buy whatever they want. It's so easy. And then they get into work and they're so frustrated. We got to use a BlackBerry? Are you kidding me?
But here's a perfect example. Even BlackBerry, perfect. When President Obama became president, he brought his BlackBerry into the White House. Everybody had a fit, right? He said, you can't use a BlackBerry. He said, no. This is what I use in order to do my stuff. So, yeah, I can. And to me, that's what's called customer-led thinking, customer experience-led thinking, not systems-led. People used to have to be trained. Remember, we used to go to, some of us used to have to go to training to learn the email system. That would be like a cognitive dissonance right now. We would go, what do you mean it doesn't do what I have to learn this thing? That's ridiculous, right? I would just use Outlook or something else.
Gmail.
So that's the upside down effect to me.
Great question. Thank you. Way in the back. In the back, by the windows.
Great.
Thank you. One of the things that drives legacy thinking is legacy processes. So you can have all the creative thinking you want, but if you have a strategic plan that's oriented to a fiscal year, that's oriented to a budgeting process, that then drives performance reviews, it's very hard, to Dave's point about procurement processes. In fact, any enterprise at scale has an infrastructure of processes that are completely alien to agile thinking. So it's great to talk about being unified, but have any of you seen any endeavors at really moving those processes to becoming more dynamic and less of the fundamental immutable driver?
Well, it's what we do all the time, right? We rail against it.
But it's, within the larger corporations, they've got a long way to go. You have a good point.
I will say, like there's a report last year from Gartner that talks about the different kinds of systems, right? So there used to be a monolithic, like the system that was sort of, sclerotic, a little bit arthritic, cranky.
The matrix.
The matrixy, right? But now there are layers of systems that at the top layer or at the layer closest to people are more pliable, versatile, perhaps more sort of user-friendly. That's one. In terms of process, it's just now getting there. It's just now, people are throwing around words like agile in boardrooms. Not exactly accurately, but still, it's getting there.
I tell you, I would love, if we had another hour, I would love to go where this is all heading. We've talked a lot about how far we've come, but you're the guys who really can see where all this is heading. Maybe that would be a great panel topic for next time, because, yeah.
Well, you mentioned government. I read a recent Harvard Business Review article called Triple Strength Leadership, and the concept is that government, not-for-profit, and the private sector should be talking a lot more. And in this day and age, this cross-pollinization would be really beneficial to all sectors. And you've seen people move from one sector to the other quite successfully. You have people like Bill Gates, who's a company founder, who ultimately founded one of the most successful not-for-profits. So I think having that kind of dialogue amongst various sectors can create greater ideas and greater efficiencies. The more diversity of discussion, the greater the results for all organizations in all sectors.
I know we're running a little bit late, but if maybe one more question or two more, we'll get, yeah, we'll do that, and we'll go over here.
Just about a year ago in the digital space, everybody was talking about devices as being the next big thing. I mean, obviously, the Nike fuel ban was such a big deal. And now this weekend, they laid off the entire staff in developing the product, and they're focusing more on the delivery of the digital systems. And I'm just wondering, do you still see a future in devices and experience in the digital space, and is that still as a fertile an area for exploration for brands right now?
Well, I'd like to say, you know, we've got a great panel coming up from insights to engagement. And one of the panelists is Ganesh Bell, who's flying in from San Francisco from GE. He's Chief Digital Officer of GE. And he's focused on every device that's connected to the internet. You know, so when we think about all the information that we're trying to gather, I think we've assembled an interesting panel because we've got the Chief Digital Marketing Officer from Nielsen, who's obviously looking at all this data. We've got a neuroscientist who built the Time Warner Media Lab downstairs, who's more focused on your eye movements when you're watching a TV in a second device, and all the data we get from sweaty palms and where, you know, your facial movements and, you know, whether or not you watch the advertisement till the end or you change the channel. So that's a whole nother set of data you're getting from devices and from people's movements. And finally, we've got, you know, the guy from GE, Ganesh, who's really looking at, you know, how do we get information from all of these devices from our products that are now connected to the internet. So when you talk about, you know, I'm not sure in what sense you're talking about devices, but well, that should be a fascinating panel.
It's more from the standpoint of like how important is it in the growth of the role and whether or not, you know, to put it in context of this particular discussion.
Could you give him the mic because we're taping?
Yeah, no, we got that. I saw that. I saw that that Nike had laid off the people who make the devices, and I think it's a logical step because they're not in the device making business.
Right.
And I think that's right. You know, they also don't have people who pour rubber, you know, or make the laces. So I think it's perfectly right. There's a company in China, in Taiwan called Xiaomi. They make some of the best phones out there, and they have no sales force. They have no factory, and they have no stores. And they don't sell through any other channel but the internet channel. They outsell Apple in China. And they are now coming on to Southeast Asia. They make nothing but the customer experience. Right. That's what they do. So yeah, and so they've taken the because so many people can build devices so well now. Brands can focus on what they do best rather than trying to do it all.
Great example. Yes, one final question.
Sometimes I see situations where the digital side is tasked with sort of giving outbound expression of something that's supposed to be great or wonderful, but the problem is that the internal processes actually don't match that. In other words, it's like the actual company or product doesn't match the things that digital is tasked with trying to say they do. It's like put a great shine on this thing, but it actually has to, you know, the thing itself has to be better. In other words, so I guess my question is, can we see a tail wagging the dog where, you know, because it really gets a point that you made, Jonathan, and you made, Chan, you know, of the strategy has to be there. There has to be, you know, whether you call it integrated or everybody rowing in the same direction or whatever. It just, you know, digital can't solve the problem if if the thing itself isn't correct, right, good.
Yeah,
like what you were saying about good advertising is going to kill bad product faster than anything else.
Yeah, but I said it like this. All right. Yeah, but you know, it's funny. No, I'm glad you brought that up because I got to tell you that was my life. You know, I think in my career, for the vast majority of my career, we oversold and underdelivered just because of those situations, and that frustrated me to no end. I can't even tell you. But you know, we used to refer to that as I'm gonna pull a shing here, but we used to call that putting whipped cream on dog shit. And I'm not in that business to do that, and I don't want to do that. But I think what we all have to realize is whatever the goals of the organization, whatever the goals of the client or the brand, the best advice I can ever give anybody is, you guys, I don't care what anybody says, it's a recession, okay? Things are not going well out there, and convention is broken. And it takes somebody to stand up and make that bold move. And I got to tell you, at least in my career, in the times that I have stood up and made those bold decisions, and I'm sure people didn't want me in the room sometimes, but I think the best product and the best service and the best brand executions came out of that because somebody had the balls to stand up and make those decisions. You guys, take a step back, take a deep breath, and ask your partners in crime, what is it that we're trying to do? Because this isn't about anybody's agenda anymore. The economy's in the shitter. People have their own agendas. People are clinging to hang on to their jobs. But no one's going to have a job if the right decision isn't made and somebody doesn't step up and be bold. And that's what I've...
it's a tough position. CDOs are in that position sometimes where they have to speak the truth.
Constantly. But you know what?
At the risk of maybe even losing a client.
If you're, to your point earlier, Chang, if somebody is an officer of that company, that is your responsibility. And these people around me, these people around you guys, we're holding their job and their livelihoods in our hands. You know, sometimes, you know, the right decision hurts. But if you either suffer a little bit of pain now or complete anguish later and people lose their jobs. The people that are CDOs or people here that are playing those roles or know people who are playing those roles, you've got to hand them the keys in some cases. And the ego aside, you have to. I've never met a more egoless person than my partner Jamal. You know, but he's a guy who says, look, right is right and wrong is wrong, and it's that simple. If it's a recession, reinvent yourself first and then help reinvent the company.
You know, having come from the agency side and now I'm at a consultancy, we used to always make fun of consultants. You know, we used to always say like, oh, it's okay if you have an MBA, don't worry, you'll get rid of it soon. But I will say this, what I'm learning when I've gone sort of like upstream a little bit, is that question that you brought up, which is we make these assertions, then the products or the service turn out to be not those assertions. And what we're sensing here is a lack of integrity, right, in what we do. And human beings are sort of wired to find that lack of integrity, and then trust is lost in the brand. And what we're understanding is that it's not enough to sort of wave our hands and do magic digital stuff. You've got to change the way that the brand and the product is made. And even before that, you've got to change the way that the organization, to your point, that the organization decides to what business it's in and what things it will provide. Okay? And so I'm appreciating that part a little bit more than I used to, because that sort of cycle of integrity, right? That spectrum of integrity is now more visible than ever. You're going to get found out one way or another. Okay, so that to me is much more important than it used to be.
Fabulous. That's a great way to end on a positive note. Besides the recession, we can end on a positive note.
You didn't like the whipped cream comment? I take it.
The whipped cream comment. Well, I want to please join me in thanking our panelists for a fabulous session. Thank you, guys. It was great.